The whisper in the catacombs, the deafening silence. The silence, a silence that echoes louder than any symphony, deeper than the catacombs beneath the eternal city. A silence that stretches through the corridors of power, through the rooms where millenary secrets rest. But it is no ordinary silence. It is a silence that screams, that accuses, that foreshadows. The Vatican, the fortress of faith, the epicenter of spiritual power, immersed in a suffocating muteness. Why the silence? What do they hide in the shadows of their walls? What do the ancient stones whisper in secret? And why, suddenly, does the echo of the prophecies of a 16th century French apothecary resonate with a terrifying intensity? The ideas of Nostradamus written in his quatrains, for rhyming verses, once mere historical curiosities, now transform into a somber enigma, an apocalyptic puzzle where the name of Pope Francis seems to fit with a disturbing precision. And what if this silence were not just the absence of sound? What if it were the presence of something hidden, something that crawls in the shadows, something that is about to be revealed? But what could be so terrible that even the voice of the Church would fall silent? In the depths of the Vatican's secret archives, where time seems to have stopped, lie documents that have never seen the light of day. Manuscripts that contain secrets that the Church prefers to keep buried. And among them, whispers about an end, a decline, a prophecy that points to a leader, a shepherd, who will face his twilight. Could it be mere coincidence? Or could the words of Nostradamus, encoded in a labyrinth of symbols and metaphors, be a foreboding of what is to come? And why, precisely now, does the Vatican fall silent? Is it fear? Is it preparation? Or is it the acceptance of an inevitable destiny? What is the silence of the Vatican trying to tell us? And what do Nostradamus quatrains really mean? Could the end of Pope Francis be just the beginning of something much greater? Something that is about to shake the foundations of faith itself? Behold, the lion falls silent. Nostradamus quatrains deciphered? In the labyrinth of words and symbols that Nostradamus bequeathed to us, a phrase resonates with a disturbing force. Behold, the lion falls silent. The lion, a powerful metaphor, a symbol of authority, of power, of leadership. And in the context of the Vatican, this image becomes even more laden with meaning. Could the lion be Pope Francis himself? The leader of the Catholic Church, the man who occupies the throne of St. Peter, about to be silenced? But silenced by whom? Why? And what would be the significance of this silence? Nostradamus quatrains, written centuries ago, are like an indecipherable puzzle, an enigma that defies logic and reason. Each word, each symbol, each image can have multiple meanings, multiple interpretations. And it is in this swampy terrain, this minefield of ambiguities, that conspiracy theory flourishes. Some scholars, or rather, some deciphers of shadows, point to the specific quatrain, the one that mentions the lion as a harbinger of the end of Francis' pontificate. They argue that the symbols and metaphors used by Nostradamus leave no room for doubt. The lion, they say, is the Pope, and the silence is the omen of a cataclysmic event, an event that will shake the foundations of the Church. But what event? Could it be a sudden death? An internal coup? A millenary conspiracy that finally materializes? Or could it be something even darker? Something that transcends human understanding? Nostradamus quatrains, like an enigmatic oracle, do not reveal details. They merely whisper, insinuate, leave enigmatic clues that lead us to question everything we thought we knew. And while the Vatican remains silent, while the shadows lengthen through the corridors of power, the question echoes in our minds. What did Nostradamus really predict? And what is this deafening silence trying to hide from us? Fire in the heavens, ashes on earth. The prophecy of the papal apocalypse? What if Nostradamus quatrains spoke not only of the end of a man, but of the end of an era? And what if the Vatican's silence was not just a harbinger, but a preparation for the inevitable? Fire in the heavens, ashes on earth. The words echo like thunder, an apocalyptic prophecy that makes us question reality itself. But what fire? What ashes? And what is the connection to Pope Francis? Some interpreters of shadows, those who seek patterns where others see coincidences, point to the growing global instability. They speak of solar storms that could paralyze technology, of volcanic eruptions that could cover the sky with ash, of extreme weather events that could devastate entire cities. Could these be the signs that Nostradamus foresaw? Are these the events that the Vatican fears? And what if the fire were not literal, but a metaphor for an internal crisis, a power struggle that consumes the church from within? And what if the ashes represented the destruction of faith, the loss of hope, the collapse of a millenary institution? Nostradamus quatrains, like an indecipherable enigma, leave us with more questions than answers. But the Vatican's silence continues, a silence that becomes increasingly deafening, increasingly threatening. And as the world prepares for the unknown, as Nostradamus' prophecies become increasingly relevant, the question echoes in our minds. What does the future hold for Pope Francis? And for the Catholic Church? And for all of us? The Last Shepherd. Symbolism and irony in the decline of the pontificate. The title Last Shepherd echoes like a funeral knell, a somber omen that hangs over Francis' pontificate. But what does it truly mean? Could it be a direct reference to the end of a lineage, the last leader of an era? Or is it a cruel irony, a paradox that leads us to question the very nature of faith? In the Christian tradition, the shepherd is a figure of protection, of guidance, of salvation. But what if this shepherd were about to get lost? What if he were about to lead his flock into the abyss? Nostradamus quatrains, with their metaphors and symbolism, invite us to explore this dark possibility. Some interpreters of shadows, those who seek hidden meanings in the subtext of history, point to the decline of the Catholic Church's influence in the modern world. They speak of internal crises, of scandals, of the loss of faithful. Could Francis be the last leader to witness this decline? Could he be the last shepherd of a flock that is scattering? And what if the last shepherd was not just a reference to the end of a pontificate, but to the end of an era? And what if the Vatican's silence was a tacit confession, a recognition that the Church is about to face its greatest challenge? Nostradamus quatrains, with their ambiguity and their enigmatic prophecies, leave us with more questions than answers. But the Vatican's silence continues, a silence that becomes increasingly oppressive, increasingly threatening. And as the world watches, as Nostradamus' prophecies become increasingly relevant, the question echoes in our minds. What is the true meaning of the Last Shepherd? And what is the destiny of the Catholic Church? The Vatican ablaze, the metaphor of chaos and destruction. What if the Vatican's silence was not just a harbinger, but a tacit confession that chaos is about to set in, that destruction is imminent? The Vatican ablaze. The words echo as an apocalyptic warning, a metaphor for the collapse of a millenary institution. But what flames? What destruction? And what is the connection to Pope Francis? Some interpreters of shadows point to the growing polarization in the world, to the intensifying religious conflicts, to the fragility of global peace. They speak of a crisis of faith, of a spiritual void that could lead to violence, to chaos, to destruction. Could these be the flames that Nostradamus foresaw? Is this the destruction that the Vatican fears? And what if Nostradamus quatrains were not just prophecies, but a coded warning about the end of an era, the collapse of a world order based on faith and tradition? And what if the Vatican's silence was an attempt to contain panic, to prevent the prophecy from becoming self-fulfilling? Nostradamus quatrains, with their ambiguity and their enigmatic prophecies, leave us with more questions than answers. But the Vatican's silence continues, a silence that becomes increasingly heavy, increasingly threatening. And as the world watches, as Nostradamus' prophecies become increasingly relevant, the question echoes in our minds. What is the true meaning of the Vatican ablaze? And what is Pope Francis' role in the end times? What if? The question that haunts the future of the Church. What if everything we have seen so far was just the tip of the iceberg? What if Nostradamus quatrains, the Vatican silence, and the fate of Pope Francis were just pieces of a much larger puzzle? An enigma that leads us to question the very nature of reality. What if? The question echoes like a ghost, a shadow that hangs over the future of the Church. But what if what? What if Nostradamus' prophecies were just a warning, a harbinger of an event that transcends human understanding? Some interpreters of shadows point to the possibility of a parallel reality, of a universe where prophecies are fulfilled literally, of a future where the Church faces its greatest challenge. They speak of hidden dimensions, of alternative timelines, of a destiny that bifurcates and is lost in a labyrinth of possibilities. Could this be the reality that Nostradamus foresaw? Is this the reality that the Vatican fears? And what if Nostradamus quatrains were not just prophecies, but a portal to another dimension, a map to a future that unfolds in a parallel universe? And what if the Vatican's silence was an attempt to seal this portal, to prevent reality from unraveling? Nostradamus quatrains, with their ambiguity and their enigmatic prophecies, leave us with more questions than answers. But the Vatican's silence continues, a silence that becomes increasingly heavy, increasingly threatening. And as the world watches, as Nostradamus' prophecies become increasingly relevant, the question echoes in our minds. What if everything we believe to be true is wrong? And what if the end of Pope Francis is just the beginning of something much greater? Something that is about to shake the foundations of reality itself?